Here's the list of things that I've found so far. Mysterious brake fluid loss, no idea where it's going. There's so much grime and gunk under there that it could just be seeping right into the gunk and oil, and I'm gonna have to start cleaning off a lot of stuff to find that. Obvious coolant leak, I know where that's coming from. That's not a big deal, but it does have to be addressed. The driver window switch, obvious. That's gonna take some electrical diagnostics. Gas pedal free play, that's kind of worrying. Probably just gonna be an accelerator cable adjustment. All side markers except for the front passenger are not working, so burnt out bulbs or wiring, gonna have to get to that. Low clutch pedal, that sucks, and related to the brake fluid loss. All the CV boots are busted, slinging goo everywhere. That's why it's all dirty down there. The ABS pump is leaking some weird yellow crap, no idea what that is about. That's just first inspection. Power steering rack, yeah, all that power steering fluid loss, yep, coming out of the rack. Rack's gonna have to be replaced. No power steering because of it, and I haven't been able to drive it yet, so I'm sure I'm gonna get to that one eventually. And of course, shifter slap, gonna need new shifter bushings. 3 videos I've covered different shifter related issues, so I'm not gonna rehash that. I probably will not be recording all this just because I need to get it done. If there is one of these videos that you absolutely want to see me cover, obviously I have had the power steering rack requested previously, so I will probably be covering that. The electronic diagnostics, I'll probably make a video because those are short and real sweet and real easy to record. So that's where we're at so far. I have yet to check the back of the car. That's just on first inspection. Well, the oil filter was last changed in February. It's nice of them to write it on there. It looks new enough so that I believe it. And there's a missing bolt on the exhaust. I guess that's a pre-cat right there. I can't see back behind there, but I think it's supposed to be a pre-cat. The inspection cover is missing, and that flywheel is freaking rusted to shit. Yeah, so no inspection cover, sitting for a couple months, and yeah, there's obviously all this oil right here is not a main seal leak. That's actually coming from over here where the drain, the gear oil drain bolt is. Mounts are okay. I'm gonna have to get a pry bar and pry up this front mount and check that out. The reason why I brought you under here is I wanted you to see this. Somebody stuffed a sock underneath of there to keep it from rattling. Now if that sock would have gotten sucked into that fan, I mean, I think they just replaced the grommets on the bottom with this shirt here. They just stuffed this. This is a really mess. Who the hell was working on this shit? Alright, I'm just going to leave that be for now. I'll revisit that in the future. The belts look like they're in okay shape. They're not too out of date. The other belt, though, I think needs to be replaced. This one, whatever that goes to that runs along the back. This pulley right here is cracked. I think that's your adjuster pulley, because this is the adjuster bolt right here. And right here on this end, that is cracked, so that could chew up all the belts. And I noticed that I had ABS tone rings, and sure enough, this car has ABS. There's an ABS pump up at the front. So this is a fully loaded 96 ES. Right there is a leak from all the power steering fluid. Power steering fluid is everywhere. All the lower splash shields are broken, ripped off. I'm almost inclined to think that's a wideband of some kind. I've never seen that one. I could be wrong. You know, I'm new to V6s. Fog lights are missing, but the switch and all the stock system is hooked up. All I have to do is put a new fog light in there. And I'm pretty sure there was fog lights in there, not bezels. This has all the options, and it has a fog light switch in there. There's the ABS pump right in there. Could be an ABS issue. I don't know. There's no check engine light. But this radiator support peg right here should be inside of here. But if I were to put in a new radiator, the new radiators do come with grommets. So this would situate correctly. And you can buy just the grommets individually, I think, but do not just stuff a rag down in there, because if that rag comes out, gets loose and gets sucked into that fan, it'll burn up your AC compressor. Maybe that's what happened. This car has not been very well maintained. I hate to think of what the old engine looked like. This thing, I'm not happy with. I'm not happy with this just dangling down, because you can see cracks already forming in here from this weight being unsupported. I'm gonna have to fix that. It does have brakes, it does have clutch, very little. That fluid's going somewhere, and I can't figure out where it's going. Maybe it's leaking internally inside the pump. I have no experience with ABS. Maybe the ABS is playing a role in all of the brake related and clutch related issues. I do get slave engagement. I have to actually put it on the floor. It has to touch on the floor. Way too harsh. So there's obviously no pressure in there because it was run dry. So now I'm gonna have to bleed all the brakes, waste all that fluid, and then hopefully they'll work, and if not, then there's going to be a leak somewhere. Actually, there's probably a leak somewhere because that shouldn't run dry, period, regardless. So there's going to be a leak somewhere. Just need to figure out where it is. I just refilled it, and so far it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. So if it is a leak, it's a really slow leak. But even a really slow leak is going to evacuate pressure when you use the clutch or the brakes. So that's a dangerous situation. Ugh, got a lot of work ahead of me. Chloe, I hope you're appreciating this. See those two cables up there? You can see them sticking out. The gas pedal is so loose because the gas pedal arms aren't even grabbing onto those cables. And I'll try and press down lightly so you can see how those... See, now the cables are actually touching. So way too much free play in the cable. It's not the fault of the gas pedal, I don't think. I think the gas pedal is adjusted about as good as it can get. No, I think that's still way too low. There's some other kind of adjustment here. Maybe if those cables were taut right here while the pedal's in this position, I think that's way too much free play. You're going nowhere fast with that kind of engagement. If you see, notice the little tabs here. The tabs aren't even pulled into the bracket. It's this, look, it's still loose. It's not even, it wasn't even installed. You have to take this, shove it through so these little prongs here click into place. So I need a bracket. That's what the problem is. When they did the engine swap, they didn't get the right bracket. So that's gonna have to be remedied for sure. It's not exactly gonna work now, is it? I don't even think this is the right cable. This isn't the right cable either. So this whole thing is just messed up. So on that KL, it should be sitting way back here. All right, that's what the problem is the difference, because this curve neck is much shorter. See, now it's off. So yeah, look how loose that is. It's just way too loose. What I have to do with those cables is shim the cables. I have to figure out a way to shim those. All this is wrong. It's because they did an engine swap with a curve neck. At least they got everything working. So, you know, credit to them. They got it working. They're missing a lot of components that would have made this install clean. So it's just quality of install. And now I have to put the quality in the install. Problems just keep piling up, and I think the majority of them come from an unfinished swap. So down here we have a hose that has been cut, and that comes from the intake manifold. So basically that's a vacuum leak. The EGR has a tiny little tube that comes off of the top of the EGR. That's for the vacuum, and that should be routed around to the EGR solenoid. That's going nowhere. It's just a port, open port. This, which goes to vapor canister, so we got fuel vapor going here to this solenoid, and then this solenoid is open, venting into the engine bay. Fuel vapor venting into the engine bay. Awesome. Finding little issues like that. I'm surprised this engine's even running right. I mean, that's a massive air leak. Of course I'm going to get low idle. EGR's now working, venting fuel vapor into the engine bay, but at least they got it running. You know, I am impressed, okay, they got it that far, but they didn't finish the job. They didn't know enough to do vacuum and emissions routing correctly. You should be able to find a vacuum routing diagram and hook everything right back up the way it came. Hey, I guess that's why I have it, and that's why it came to the right place, right? Right. The guy that sold it to me didn't make a single reference to trying to pass it off as a ZE. And I told him I was an enthusiast, so maybe he didn't even want to try. And even if he would have said something, I would have checked the head stamps for the KL31 heads. I know the difference between the KLDE head stamps and the KLZE head stamps, and they're very easy to find. The head stamps are right down in this area, and you can see them, they're in plain daylight. And the same thing with, well, the back one is the back head is a little bit harder to see. If you look down in here and you see that it says KL31-1A1, that's a ZE. If it just says KL-1A1, that's a regular DE. But I've never really been into the V6 on a Zen level like I have the 4-cylinder for the past 3 years at least. I know a lot about the 4-cylinder. 6-cylinder, still relatively new, so I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about it. but I do know that this is a DE with a Millennia curved neck manifold. Still finding unexpected little things here and there, and I can see why they just wanted to say sell it, get rid of it. It's a headache. I don't want to have to deal with it anymore, especially if they don't know what they're doing. They don't have access to the correct wiring diagrams. I asked him if he'd ever checked out Mazda626.net, and he said no. I asked him if he ever watched 66 videos online. He said yes, but he was unfamiliar who I was. I'm not saying you don't know what you're doing if you don't know who I am, or if you don't visit the Mazda 626 website. You're not going to have access to all of the information that you want in order to complete a project like that unless you have access to those resources. Those resources are tools. Use those tools. You know, ask questions in the forums, ask where the factory workshop manuals are, get your hands on the factory workshop manuals, follow the routing diagrams. For a beginner, looking at this stuff, it just looks like a web of spaghetti just wrapped all over the place. And it takes a while until you can figure out what goes to where. And even enthusiasts, if they look at this stuff, they don't know exactly where everything goes. If you were to rip all the hoses off, they would have a hard time putting everything back together without a diagram. Even enthusiasts need diagrams. Everyone needs the access to those resources, especially if you're a beginner and you're taking on a major project for your first time. You need access to diagrams. You cannot do projects like this without those very critical resources. I've been looking at some vacuum routing and evap diagrams lately, try and hook all this stuff back up. And I don't know if you noticed this, but to me it kind of looks like the engine is slanted downward on this side just a little bit. And that kind of calls into question the mounts and the mounting bracket differences between the curved neck. It's either a difference in the mounts or just because the mounts are just shot and done, which is completely possible. There's a lot of work ahead of me. No, I'm not going to paint this. I'm not going to put lipstick on it and try and make it look real pretty like my car. I'm just trying to get this sucker running correctly, and that's a tall enough order in itself. Alright, I started taking the throttle body apart. Other than the obvious issue here, it looks like there's the EGR boost sensor here, which goes into the fuel pressure regulator. Yes, you heard that right. Then there's this nice little addition here. Oops. Just a big screw stuck in there, and it's not even tight. It's loose. That's a vacuum leak. There are vacuum leaks all over this car. How in the hell this car is running, I have no idea. Are these wires that are just... I'm guessing that goes to the knock sensor, because that goes way directly in the back there. And that's on this connector. Cut the wire and spliced in the connection. Either way, it's not the right way to do it. Resolder it. Shrink wrap it. Looks like a red wire and a black wire, a red wire and a green wire, something like that. And both of those wires are stripped and then hooked directly into that thing. It's just one thing after another. This thing was just rigged. This thing is rigged up. I'm not sure if there's one correct connection on this damn thing. I could be guessing here, but I'd be willing to bet that no one's bled these brakes in a long time. That is supposed to be a clear tube. I think that's probably related to a clutch problem. Oh, what? Oh, Jesus. Black clutch fluid. That's a first for me. Fairly certain that is not power steering fluid. That smells so weird. I think it's brake fluid. I think that's brake fluid. The color's right though. There's something else in here. There's something else. It's not right. I think this is brake fluid in the power steering system. I don't think they knew what to fill it up with, so they filled it up with brake fluid. It busted out all of the seals. It even chewed through this hose right here. There's a leak on the bottom of that hose. Power steering rack is fucked now. This is turning into a seriously costly repair. I should have bought this for a junkyard price. This is a junkyard car at this point. That adds about $400 in parts and labor. And that's just for my parts and labor. Brake fluid and the power steering. Here's the brake fluid that I pulled out of the sleigh cylinder, and here's the brake fluid that I pulled out of the power steering. Brake fluid everywhere. Well, I started pulling all the crap out from the trunk. Inside of there is a whole bunch of liquid. So then I pull up this carpet piece, and down in there, yeah, that's just a whole bunch of nasty shit. It looks like coolant that just leaked out from all the coolant jugs. I think they were actually driving this around with all these coolant jugs in the back, and then of course they just come loose, and all this is just wet back here. And I don't think that's from leaks in the trunk. I think that's actually all just coolant jugs falling out. It's going to take me a while to clean all this crap up, and the carpet is never going to be the same. It's just a shame, really. It's just a shame. This car was not well maintained. I've seen cars in junkyards that look better than this. I should not have paid more than junkyard price for this car. This car was a heartbeat away from going to a junkyard. The only thing it had going for it was that they still had a running engine. If the engine in this car had not been running, I guarantee you this car would be in a junkyard right now. I also figured out what was going on with the power steering. Lucas power steering stop leak. They put stop leak in the power steering system. Mechanic in a bottle is not going to fix a busted rack. It's shot. It's got to be replaced. That's big money. They didn't want to do it. $5 bottle. Maybe that'll fix it. What harm could it do? A lot of harm, actually. It just makes shit worse. Do not do this kind of shit. Do not ever put any kind of stop leak, anything, anywhere in the car. That kind of stuff is designed to coagulate and stop leaks. Well, yeah, that's what it's designed to do, right? But guess what? It doesn't pick and choose where it does it. There is a good chance that it will just solidify an entire passageway, and then there you go. There goes your power steering, blows out your power steering pump, and then your power steering reservoir just starts spurting out fluid because it can't go anywhere. So they tried a couple different kinds of power steering fluid in there, my guess, because I found a couple different kinds of jugs, and then they tried the stop leak. I don't recommend stop leak in the cooling system, let alone in the power steering. That's just bad. Bad, 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 bad. Well, while I was inspecting underneath the dash, I found this thing. Took me a half an hour to tear it out. Want to guess what it is? I'll give you a couple seconds. That's an RJ45 jack, also known as a telephone cord. Yep, that's an old ass telephone for a mobile office. I looked it up, and last year those were produced. It's 1993. This is a 1996 car. All of these wires are spliced into the radio harness. So it's a transmitter, so it uses the antenna. No, I'm not going to rewire the whole damn thing. And of course the dash cracked in half. They super glued it back together. As soon as I went to take it off, it crumbled into a couple different pieces. It was like a cookie crumbling in my hand. It just completely fell to pieces. They tried really hard to hide all the issues on this car. And I have no doubt that I am not done finding issues on this car. And it basically comes down to poor maintenance and the owner not giving two craps about this car for the past 10 years. One thing I don't like about this model is there's no ignition key light. I think that's a handy feature to have. This little box looking thing goes to the telephone. It's a really weird setup. And I imagine that's where the telephone was mounted, was on those little 4 screw holes there. There's a lot of phantom wires in here that are just connected to nothing. When I pulled all these wires out, I pulled all on the door edge, all the way back to the trunk, and then they just boop, pulled right out, and they were cut. Finding a lot of that. Somebody didn't give a shit to uninstall it properly, cut all the wires, and now there's 3 times more wires back there than should be. Oh, they also put 5 air fresheners to mask the oil smell coming from the trunk. Well, I left the car out in the rain yesterday, and sure enough, it leaks all over the place. It was actually dripping down from that middle sunroof. Drip, drip,